Let's have a look at the cloud landscape. It's a huge ecosystem with a lot of opportunities. When you look at the cloud computing market, it's an ever-growing market as well. It's growing faster than the ads market because it's a newer market and newcomers are joining and joining. The message here is that we are basically only at the beginning of the cloud transformation we are seeing globally, which means that if you step in now, you're basically securing your future because there is a huge wave coming, a wave of transformation, and you're going to be at the forefront of what's happening. You can choose whether you want to serve that wave or if you want to take it in your face, right? Well, if you're in the tech invaders community, I know that you choose to serve that wave. Okay, let's go back to our example. IKEA again. Now we move from the marketing discussions and business discussions to the tech transformation decisions that they have to make. It comes from the CEO as well, because the CEO always has the big budget decisions, but then the decision maker on which tech you're going to use is basically coming from the CTO, the Chief Technological Officer. He's the one that has to make sense of everything. During the 6 months of COVID, e-commerce sales have grown by 5 years. That was drastic. And when you look at businesses, some of them were ready and others were completely lost. Because behind a retailer like IKEA, there is a lot of data. There is a lot of processes. There are a lot of tools, right? You have marketing data, customer data, product data, inventory data, blah, 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 blah. A retailer is now moving from being a traditional business to being a specialized business in their market, generating a lot of specialized data. So they need to make sense of all of this data. Usually, historically, this data sits in silos in the company, which means that every team, every department has its own chunk of data, of tools. And the problem is that this data is not communicating well, which means that decisions take a lot of time to be made, which means that there is a lot of legacy and a lot of cost involved by managing this data and managing all the tools. That's where the cloud comes into play. Do you know who are the cloud leaders? The Amazon Web Service team is generating 30% of the market for the cloud sector, followed by Microsoft Azure and followed by Google Cloud. But they are not the only ones. There are other key players that are growing as well because the market is changing. The money doesn't always go to the top 3 leaders. You have Salesforce, Oracle, and even foreign players like Alibaba. So what's the cloud? Let me give you a very high-level pitch for you to understand the concept of the cloud. Let's go back to our IKEA example. You know they have a lot of data and they need to make sense of it. Well, with the cloud, you can basically make sense of all the data with a better understanding of what's happening in the business with tools that enables to analyze the data, ingest it, transform it, and even deploy AI. With the cloud, you can allow IKEA to be more flexible because you have a huge infrastructure with a lot of compute power. Remember the data centers we saw earlier? Well, basically IKEA can rent the data center from Google, Amazon, or Microsoft. Those are the Rolls-Royce data centers in the market, and they just pay for what they consume, which enables them to innovate faster, deploy new solutions. That's the flexibility that offers the cloud. The cloud offers connections between teams with collaboration tools. You can think about Microsoft 360 or Google Workspace. And obviously the cloud offers a huge layer of security. Security is, as we mentioned, very important. If you put your data in a cloud provider and use their tools, you can basically think that they have the best security barriers that exist on Earth. Sustainability is a big topic as well. Well, as IKEA, you can basically choose which cloud provider you want to work with based on the level of carbon emissions you will emit, based on the amount of renewable energies that are fueling the data centers. And there is a little competition between companies to show which cloud is greener. If you want to have an impact on Earth, you can also choose where you want to work for. So let me give you an example. BeReal, I don't know if all of you know, but BeReal is a social network that is a competitor to Instagram. It was very big a couple of years ago. BeReal was one of my customers. The case is external, so you can find it on the Google Cloud post, and that's why I can talk about it. They had a very big challenge to face. Basically, the concept is that you are with all your friends, and suddenly you receive a notification, and you need to send a picture of the moment for you to be real. It's the contrary of Instagram, where you set up everything perfectly before sending the picture. BeReal is like, hey, I need to send my picture now. Whatever you're doing, you send it. You can think it's a very easy use case, right? The problem or the opportunity was that BeReal was growing so fast, they were acquiring more than 500,000 users every day, which means that every day they had more and more users, millions of users that would at a random time send a picture, load it on the platform and deliver it to their friends. This created a huge challenge on the cloud infrastructure they would use, right? Because you need your app to be running, to be smooth for the users who have the best experience ever. So my role was to understand the problem, look at all the resources we could have at hand to help BeReal, which means customer engineer consultations, credits. I onboarded them on the Google Cloud for Startup program and we invested euros into them because we believe there was a huge opportunity. By the way, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all the cloud providers are offering a lot of credits to startups for them to build on their platform. There is a war trying to find which is the next startup, so they want to invest in them so that they will build on their own platform, right? So that's what they did. And basically, our customer engineer faced another challenge, which was the technological challenge. How can we make sure our app is running at a random moment in the journey every day? So that's where he connected with specialists in the US in order to book big compute machines that would be able to process the peak of usage. And we made it. And the customer grew so fast that it evolved from my team, the SMB team, the small and medium businesses, to the team in France, where they have more resources for them. That's the evolution of a customer. They join small, they grow, and once they are big enough, they move to another team that will have more resources for them. So by showing you this example, you can see that a cloud provider is both helping traditional businesses to modernize, but also helping a lot of startups to innovate and find solutions in precise markets. This is a B2C example, but obviously most of the startups I was working with were B2B startups, solving business issues in every sector. So our goal as a sales rep in the cloud sector is to assess and qualify the opportunity, provide a and grow. The solutions you provide can take many different forms. If we go back to our IKEA example, well, you can help them on how to improve their operational excellence. This is a strategic topic. The beauty of the cloud discussions is that they have a transformational impact of the entire organization. And you can decide to transform an entire company, an entire department, or go down to a very niche issue you want to solve. By the way, I'm talking about the retail since the beginning, but every sector is concerned. And the big tech players have solutions on the shelf to use for every actor. Just to give you an example, as a retailer, IKEA might need to optimize their website and show what is the best desk on the web page so that the user that sees the desk buys it. This is improving the personalized experience on the website. That's a very niche solution, easy to use and easy to deploy. In the financial sector, you have solutions to analyze invoices. You can analyze the risk involved when loaning money, and so on and so on. And the more time passes, the more these big players are deploying verticalized solution per sector. And you, as a sales rep, you can decide to be a generalist, helping usually the small and medium businesses, or to be a specialist because you have more seniority and you want to specialize in the gaming sector because you love games and you want to help games produce better experiences, better graphism, and so on. Just to give you a little technical detail, behind these cool slides, where it's very easy to understand, well, you have a lot of technicalities. That's why your body, the customer engineer, the solution architect, and the entire expert team work with you and the customer. As a sales rep, you don't need to be an expert in everything because it's not your background and that's not what you're here for. On their side, it's their goal. Their goal is to make sure that the solution we are providing is helping the customer and that it's performant, efficient, and so on. So this is just an idea of a cloud architecture if you would like to deploy agents with AWS. You will have with your customers. If we go back to the big tech ecosystem, that's where you move to the B2B and SaaS players. There are a lot of them. The big ones are connected to the big players, either because they were built on them or because they are partners and integrated to their marketplace so that IKEA, when they base their entire infrastructure on Microsoft, well, they can use all the other tools they have directly connected in one seamless experience with one seamless bill. So you pay all your tools at once. And it has integrations that facilitate the innovation and the deployment. So what you can do is to go on Azure Marketplace, Google Cloud Marketplace, Amazon Marketplace, see all the partners they have, and that can be a good idea of which company you would want to apply. That is a niche company solving a niche issue. You have a lot of them. And the problem is that the more you dig, the more you find. So it can be a bit overwhelming. That's where I would suggest to be very careful in the companies you apply to. Be careful on the pitch. What's the solution solving? Is this really serious? Because when you look at every sector, in every industry, you have businesses, thousands of startups that arrived and tried to solve an issue. Some of them are very serious. A lot of them are not that serious or contain a lot of risk for you. You can also look at the ones that raise a lot of money from very known elite venture capitalist incubators. This is an example of the Y Combinator database, where, of course, Airbnb, Coinbase, those are the biggest names that came out of their investment, right? But there are a lot of others, and it can be pretty cool for you to deep dive in those. Every market has their own big VC company, so have a look at that. So now let me go back to 2019, 2020, 2021. I believe it was crazy because every week you had 10, 15, 20 startups raising millions of euros. And on the other side, I was working at Google Cloud and I was talking to founders every week who told me they just raised 2 million, 5 million, 10, 15, 20 million euros. And I felt something was weird because my goal was to assess the seriousness of the business. What problem are you solving? What solution are you providing on the market? Do you have a team? Do you have investment? And so on. Because I don't want to spend time on a startup or on a business that is risky. Because if I dedicate a lot of time to a risky business, then I don't reach my target. If I dedicate my time to something serious, then I really want to help them and dedicate resources for them. So that was my goal, right? Obviously, a company that raised money was a bit more serious than a company that was not even able to convince investors. But when you look at the trend for VC investment globally, from 2020 to the end of 2021, the rise of capital investment worldwide grew crazy. In Europe, France, Germany, and the UK were the top key markets, but this trend was global, especially in the US. And you can see that there is a huge drop down just after. In 2022, the bubble exploded. I remember reading a memento written by YC and sent to all their businesses. So remember, YC is one of the biggest investors worldwide. And they sent early 2022 a memento to all their startups saying, guys, there is a major crisis going on and only a few of you will survive. You really need to focus on profitability because the problem was they basically had focused only on generating money, cash. So when you have a lot of funds, you build a product and then you invest a lot in marketing, trying to get new customers. And basically you don't care about profitability. That was what was wrong. They had a lot of cash and they invested, not looking at the return on investment. So from that moment in time, they basically foresaw the crisis that was coming and they warned all the founders globally. And that's what we saw. There was a huge decline in investment. There were a lot of companies that died and there were a lot of layoffs. And this continued for the entire year of 2022, 2023. Now it's becoming back up, that they are still hiring. You had a market where big techs were laying off, but also hiring on the side. Hiring salespeople, notably, because the salespeople were the one that were able to generate the money and the profit because they were selling the solutions. And usually when you are a sales and you enter those big tech companies, as you saw, you evolve very quickly. You move from one team to another, right? So by doing so, you leave a seat open for the next one. So just to give you the full picture, I gave my resignation in early January 2022. I had 3 months notice, so I left Google in March 2022. This is where the crisis was the biggest. And for me, I was like, okay, I'm launching Tech Invaders to help people get into tech, but the big tech are laying off. Weirdly enough, they were still hiring, but it put a lot of pressure on candidates because, well, there were less offers. And they really needed to show that they really wanted to get in because these companies were at this moment very, very shy on hiring. So the bar went up. And actually the bar is still very high. And you need to have this crisis in your mind when you are applying to the companies we were talking about, because if you go in the big ones, it's a bit more secure because you have a target and you sell a solution that is well known on the market. But if you join a small one that is not famous, you will have a big target because they need to make money, but you might not be able to sell it because it's tough. And then if you don't do your numbers, well, you might get fired. So choose carefully where do you want to work in. And I would advise the bigger, the better for you. Whatever the path you take, they are all right. You can start directly into the big techs, and that's what we are aiming for. But if you choose to work with an ISV, a SaaS, or a scale-up in between, it's fine because you're going to build business acumen and tech acumen. You're going to know better what you're good at and what you want. And then you will move to the big techs. If you want to work in the service providers, it's fine as well. Just know that when you are working with a partner from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, you are in the service side of the tech. So you are not at the source of the innovation that is deploying in the market. You are being trained by the key players. Even if you are working in the big consulting firms, the big consulting firms don't know about tech. They need to be trained by the big techs. So you will always have a little delay in terms of knowledge and thought leadership on the market. It's important to know because then when you pass interviews, well, you need to demonstrate skills and you need to really decide which job you want for what you're made for. And that's exactly the purpose of the next video.